You know, I was going to wear just the crown, but I think I have a better idea for something that will be much more appropriate for me to talk about Imu-Sama. So, give me a second. What? It's the only thing that I have that looks villainous. And Im is most definitely a villain, considering that they have no problem blowing up entire islands and killing innocent people. And that they allowed the celestial dragons to continue what they're doing. So, yeah, no, Im is definitely a villain. We'll see how quickly it takes for the dog to come up here. So, I'm going to be discussing Imu-Sama and the Empty Throne. So, we'll start with the Empty Throne to a degree. So, also, I turned all of the swords back here upside down because the Empty Throne, all of the swords jabbed into the ground. I have wings. See how long the crown stays on. So, within One Piece, as I've been going through the different rulers and leaders, and now we're kind of at the apex of the world government at this point in time, which is Imu-Sama, or Im-Sama, or Im, or the great ruler of the world, or King Im, or Queen Im, or whatever the term is going to end up being once we know what their gender actually is. And so, kind of the way that we're introduced to this character is, of course, we've been aware of the Gorosei for a while. We've been aware of the Reverie for a while because of the Council of Kings, Vivi and Wapol and everything. And so we've been aware of those things. And then we learn about, we kind of learn about the Gorosei, and then we learn about the Celestial Dragons, and then we learn much more about the Gorosei. And then we start getting introduced to this Empty Throne. And the way that it's introduced is that there is this world government employee who is just talking to, he's explaining stuff to Stelly, Sabo's brother Stelly, King Stelly of the Goa Kingdom. He'll be coming up soon in my discussions. And he is explaining, the employee is explaining that every time there is a new king or queen that is starting a new dynasty, I have swords over here, but they're real, and I really don't want to pick them up because they're heavy right now, and I don't want to wave real swords around right now. That they're to take a sword. Probably they just give them a sword because Stelly does not seem like the type to carry around a sword. And even if he did, he does not seem like the type that knows how to use it. He gives off very much Joffrey vibes from Game of Thrones, which is not the only Game of Thrones reference it is going to be in this video, considering that the Empty Throne itself seems to be inspired by the Iron Throne from Game of Thrones. But we're explained that this throne that is up on this big dais and has all these different swords around it on all these different levels, that it is representing the center of the world, that it is where the Grand Line and the Red Line meet directly underneath it within Pangaea Castle. Underneath, way down at the bottom, and probably just like literally right over the top of Fishman Island, in all honesty. And this is where the Empty Throne sits. And that it's explained to Stelly, to the audience, that this throne was built 800 years ago by the founders of the world government, and by the 20 founders that founded the world government after they defeated the Great Kingdom. And as a show that no ruler would be above any of the others, they all took their weapons and stabbed them into the ground in front of the throne. And since then, every new kingdom, government, island, whatever, that has joined the world government, they again take a sword or an axe or whatever their choice of weapon is. I think, we see a couple of axes, I think, when we're looking at everything. We definitely see a lot of swords, axes. There's probably some spears in there as well. Whatever their main choice of a weapon is. And yes, I hear the dog. So 1 second. Pretty girl. Okay, the dog is now here. Yep, you're the puppy. You're the good puppy girl. And so all the different, rulers, stab their different weapons into the ground. And as I said, subsequently, I don't know if it's every time there's a new one or every time there's just one that is at least a new dynasty or a new I should have put on rings to have more glitz going on here, but whatever. And, that they, stab their weapons into the ground on the different dioceses in front of the throne, to represent that they will never try to overthrow the government, that they and their descendants will never try to do so, or they and their kingdom will never try to do so. Which, I mean, as I said, there's Game of Thrones references in this with the Iron Throne and everything like that. And, the second, pretty much by the end of this chapter, partway through the chapter where we're seeing Stelly just like being big-eyed and staring at this throne, we're like, someone's going to sit on that damn throne and it's not going to be a good thing. We are right. I know my outfit smells funny. It's been in the closet for months. Hi, yes, pretty girl. My pretty girl. My pretty girl. Yep. Hey, we see Imu-Sama being nice to butterflies. I'm sure there's some other animals that Imu-Sama is nice to. I was going to put butterflies in the background, but I don't really have enough to do that. So, no butterflies. You get a Brenda, though, who's just as cute as any butterfly. She's looking at me like, why are you dressed that way? Yeah. So, in Game of Thrones, the Iron Throne was built by, what is it, the Ares Targaryen, or whatever the one that's I don't know enough about Game of Thrones to know that exact answer for the one that built the Iron Throne and became the Targaryen king that conquered Westeros. Comment in the section if you actually know who it is. Or you could just Google it, but I don't care to do that right now. I'm in the middle of a video. And, he builds up the throne after he conquers all of these different, all the different 7 kingdoms within the realm, and, conquers their kings or queens of the time and takes their weapons and takes their crowns and, forges a new throne using dragon fire and, the swords and axes and weapons of the ones that he conquered. Which admittedly is an interesting way to get something to, get a new furniture installation. It's definitely an interesting way of doing that. Doesn't seem very safe though, considering everything is very sharp still, unless you have someone go through and actually file down the swords and actually make them a little more sanitary. As is much more highlighted the issues of that in House of the Dragon. With everything that keeps happening with Viserys, with him getting cuts and scrapes and everything like that from the throne, and then they don't heal because they're infected. I don't think the empty throne in One Piece has that issue. It looks much more comfortable, in all honesty. But what ends up happening is, of course, Stelly has to then take his sword and stab it into the ground in front of the empty throne to symbolize that neither he nor any of his descendants within his new dynasty of the Goa Kingdom will attempt to try to overthrow the world government. And we're all pretty much like, yeah, someone's going to sit their butt on that throne very soon, either by the end of this chapter or within the end of this arc. And within, I don't remember if it's within that same chapter or what, but then we are introduced to Imu-Sama. And they end up sitting on the throne, and then they have the Gorosei bow to them, which I will get much more into detail about in a few minutes. But, we see that. And we're like, yep, kind of figured something like that was going to happen. Hi, pretty girl. Yep, pretty girl. So, as I said, the majority of this video is going to be about Imu-Sama, but I wanted to talk a bit about the empty throne in that regard. That they are the mysterious occupant of the empty throne and holder of the supreme authority within the world government. Even though it really only seems to be the 5 Gorosei, the 5 elders, probably a very few select servants, and I would possibly say Garing Figureland as the head of the God's Knights that may know about Imu-Sama. That wouldn't surprise me if he did, considering how high of an authority he would have within the Celestial Dragons. But the Celestial Dragons on the whole probably do not know about Imu-Sama, because, no offense, if Charlos knew about Imu-Sama, he would be going all over going like, my king will hear about this, as opposed to my father will hear about this. you know, and we'd be like, what king? The world doesn't have a king, which is wrong. You know, the world of One Piece, within the context of the world government, does have a ruler. It's Imu-Sama. But going into the actual story to a degree, kind of what we end up getting is, of course, you know, we are introduced to Imu-Sama through this context of like them, you know, being in this garden room full of butterflies and then going down into this, you know, giant underground freezer facility within Pangea Castle, where there is this giant flippin' straw hat, and they have wanted posters for Luffy and Teach, and then they also have pictures of Vivi and Shirahoshi. And then, of course, we are shown them having sliced apart all of the pictures except for Vivi, which has then been stabbed through the, you know, stabbed. And, or, you know, that, well, no, Vivi's wasn't stabbed. Vivi was carefully held and caressed and, you know, inspected and everything. And, you know, the mere fact that we are introduced to this character by having the Gorosei show up and then bowing to this character is like, ooh, that's not a good thing. That is very not a good thing. We also know that Emu tends to refer to themselves as Mu, which also ends up being like a reference to void, and it also seems to be like a first-person pronoun to a degree in the way that it's being designed and written for how it's written in Japanese. And we get that. And we also know that they seem to not particularly care for the Will of D, considering their reactions to, you know, shredding Luffy and, you know, Blackbeard's posters. And those two very publicly have the Will of D. And then, you know, he does not care for Shirahoshi, given the fact that they, you know, he stabbed her picture. And then he does seem somewhat, you know, Eam seems to be somewhat obsessed with the Nefeltari family, you know, was obsessed with Lily 800 some years ago, seems to be obsessed with Vivi now. Beyond the whole thing of like, well, clearly Lily is going to end up looking very much like Vivi, possibly, I would hope. Okay, side note here, and I don't remember if I said this in the Lily video when I was talking about Lily for the Nefeltari family. I really freaking hope that, yeah, okay, they can have the same, like, facial design. Please, please let Nefeltari Lily have a different color hair than Vivi. It can still be within the blue spectrum, but please don't have it be the exact same blue. Please. Not that I don't like Vivi's hair color, but just have her have a different hair color. Because Vivi's blue seems to come from her mother. Yes, I know this is a side note tangent, but Vivi's blue hair color came from her mother, Titi. And unless Titi also has royal lineage, which wouldn't necessarily surprise me, considering how long the Alabasta royal family has been around, but I really don't want Lily to also have that same color of blue hair. Give her a different shade of blue. Give her a much darker blue. I would be fine with that. Give her more like a midnight type shade of blue. That would be fine. Just please don't let it be the same blue, but it's probably going to be the same blue in all honesty. In all honesty, it probably will be. But, okay, back to Imu-Sama. Imu-Sama does not like the concept of the Will of D, does not like the concept of the poneglyphs, does not like the concept of the Ancient Kingdom, probably was the one that gave the orders to have, you know, allowed them to have Ohara blown up. During the Buster call, was probably listening in on the call with the Gorosei when they were having the conversation with Clover, and Imu-Sama may have been the one to actually give them the order to actually pull the trigger on Clover, so he didn't actually say the name of the Great Kingdom. That wouldn't surprise me in the slightest, but we don't really know that. So yeah, we know that Imu-Sama has the closest relationship that they seem to have is with the Gorosei. And that is mostly just because the Gorosei are the highest ranking other members of the world government. And even though they can make decisions on a daily basis, they go to Im when they need to have like particularly big decisions made. Like which lights need to be snuffed out, whether or not to use the giant sky laser. Should we get rid of Vegapunk? Things like that. Eam has probably had a fair amount of control over those things and those decisions in that regard. So, yeah. And what we also end up seeing is Eam, for all the theories that are about Eam, which I will delve into a little bit later into the video, for all the theories of Eam, we can make as many theories as we want. These are the facts that we are given so far in the story. They do not seem to particularly care for the Nefeltari family, but they seem to be somewhat obsessed with Vivi. Whether that's because Vivi, whether that's Eam is Lily, and there's actually a connection there, but I don't particularly think that's theory's kind of been thrown out the window at this point in time by myself, but I could be wrong. And of course, we know that the only other people in the world besides the Gorosei and select members that are servants of Eam, that the only other people now that know about Imu-Sama are Sabo, Dragon, and Ivankov. And Ivankov already has their own theory about Eam, which is just hilarious, and I will be going over that. So, what we actually get into for the actual story. First of all, before we go into that, Eam does seem to have a transformation of their own, but it is still very silhouetted and very somewhat blob-like. So until we get more of a definition on that, more information, I'm not really going to go too much into that because it doesn't even have a big enough shape that we can try to figure out what it could be. Going into the actual story, the history that we have for the Empty Throne and for Eam is that, as I said, the Empty Throne was built about 800 years ago within Pangaea Castle, probably after they had managed to defeat the Great Kingdom and topple whatever residents that were up there, not the Seraphim, I know the name, King's, damn it, why can I not remember what they're called? They're not the Seraphim. I don't remember, but King's race, that they've been, knocked off the red line. And Lunarians, that the Lunarians were toppled off of the red line by the Celestial Dragons, by the ones that would become the world government. And, the 20 ruling families. And what we know ends up happening, or what we are led to believe, is that the 20 kings all, claim, signed their loyalty to the world government, that none of them would try to, overthrow the other's lies, and, that all of them put their weapons down. We find out from Cobra when he's talking with the Gorosei is that there's only actually 19 weapons in front of the throne. One of the weapons that is not there, the one that is not there, belonged to Nefeltari Lily, who was the queen of Alabasta 800 years ago. And the furthest back the furthest back member of the Will of D that we are aware of, even if we do believe that Joy Boy is a member of the D clan, we can't 100% confirm that at this point in time. But, Nefeltari D. Lily decides that she does not wish to be a part of that. She wants to go back to her kingdom. She leaves, and she never returns home. Whether this is because she got killed by the world's government at the time, the founders, whether that is she got lost, whether that is she, scattered the poneglyphs. There's a theory that Lily had the Nikko no Mi had Kuma's devil fruit back then, and she scattered all the poneglyphs all over the world, and sent them to the different countries and everything like that as like a penance that she performed for the fact that she helped the world government when she probably shouldn't have, that type of stuff. But she did not place her weapon there, and therefore there are only 19 swords in front of there. And the rest of the Celestial Dragons did not take that lightly. They did not like that at all. And while they allowed Alabasta to continue to be a member of the world government for the next 800 years, and allow the royal family, the Nefeltari royal family, to continue to rule Alabasta, they probably still kind of slighted them at times and things like that. But they can't exactly erase that as easily from world history, but still. And, then we get into Eam. And as I say, some of the first things we see Eam doing is him going and approaching the giant straw hat in the cold storage unit, within Pangaea Castle, having the bounty posters for, Luffy, Teach, and then photos of Shirahoshi and Vivi, which is of course another reason why people think that Vivi has a connection to one of the ancient weapons, which I could still buy. I can still think that there's possibly a connection there. And that Eam goes and looks at the giant frickin' straw hat. And then from there, there's also the giant room with the flowers. And then they end up in the throne room where the Gorosei go to speak with Imu-Sama, where they're also discussing the concept of doing a cleansing, which is, as I stated, never a good idea. Never a good thing if cleansing comes into a conversation of things in that regard. And they go there, and we see the Gorosei all bow down to Imu-Sama after this figure walks up the stairways on either side of the throne and gets up on the throne and sits down. And first of all, I know people say that Bigfoot and the Yeti and Sasquatch and stuff like that are like the hide and seek champions of the world. Emu is kind of the hide and seek champion of the One Piece world. If it's been 800 years and only a handful of people know that they exist, Emu's got that locked down. Because there have to be a couple of servants that are like fully devoted and raised with nothing but loyalty to Imu-Sama to be the ones to bring Imu-Sama their food, to take care of, cleaning their chambers, to clean their clothes, to, draw baths for them, different things like that. Because we hear the fact that there are guards that are going missing, that there's guards that go missing in Pangaea Castle, probably because they stumble upon Imu-Sama. But there have to be certain servants and stuff like that have this like loyalty raised into them and like beat and raised into them to not divulge Imu-Sama at all. He probably has his own separate chefs and things like that as well. Because there have to be some form of like a household setup to keep Imu-Sama happy. Or else more sky lasers may get set off because Imu-Sama is hungry and needs a needs a Snickers bar. And you can't really, you can have slaves that can be put into that regard. They don't have that amount of loyalty that can be bred into someone or raised into someone who is raised specifically for this job of serving Imu-Sama. Yes, the Gorosei can end up having this loyalty to Imu-Sama, but there's a difference there. I don't see the Gorosei as being the ones that actually go and cook and clean and help, do laundry and stuff like that for Im. I don't see the Gorosei being the ones to do that. So there has to be some other type of a separate household setup within Pangaea Castle that takes care of that, and parts of the castle that are off limits to other people. Even other celestial dragons aren't allowed into those areas. And stuff like that. So, and, side note there. But, the Gorosei look at Im and they're like, okay, well, they're all bowing and it's like, well, which light do you want us to snuff out? Do you want us to extinguish from history? And given the fact that Luffy and Blackbeard's posters were shredded, Im would probably like them to be gotten rid of just the same way that Roger was gotten rid of, because they are Will of D. They're carrying this on. If they knew that Law was a member of the Will of D, Law's poster probably would have been there if that was more public knowledge. But it's not, or was not at the time, still isn't. But like if they find out about that, then he'll probably be, jumped up a bit on the bounty list if he's not dead. I don't think Law is dead. But what also we end up seeing is he stabbed Shirahoshi's picture, so probably okay if Shirahoshi gets kidnapped by, taken and made a slave by Charlos or whatever. I don't think Imu-Sama would care. We know she got away safely, thankfully. But then you have it that they still had Vivi's poster, which is where we get into the conversation that was had with Cobra. So before I go into that, I did want to make the comment that when I was doing, research for these videos, and a while ago when I had COVID, my mom and I watched The Princess Bride, and of course there's the Wesley to Buttercup As You Wish, which means I love you. And I was like, kind of the way that the Gorosei tend to act to Imu-Sama is like, as you wish. is kind of the vibes that they give off. And I would say that that's more out of fear than anything else, fear and respect that has been drilled into them, particularly if their positions are passed down within their families, as opposed to being hand selected from all the other celestial dragons, which is a possibility both ways around. That they would have this respect for Imu-Sama, and they would be willing to do anything to try to keep Imu-Sama happy, because A, he could take away their positions, B, he could just straight up kill them if he wants to. Things like that, particularly if there's this whole, one of the theories with Im is that the Gorosei are actually just like extensions of Im, that like a part of him, a part of Imu-Sama is within each of the Gorosei, and that requires their obedience to him, to continue to be obedient to him in the first place. So that's a possibility, I guess. I don't really subscribe to that concept, but it could be there if that's what ends up happening. My thought is they're just more terrified of him, and they don't want to make Imu-Sama angry, given everything that they've seen Imu-Sama do, or that they are aware of what he is able to do, of what Imu-Sama is able to do, or what she's able to do. Or if it is a concept that Imu-Sama is female, then I guess it's, I don't know, maybe they all want to be her suitors or something. Maybe that's part of what's going on. I don't know. But, we, cut to after, a little ways further into the reverie, and, the warlord system is disbanded, which Im allowed. So Im is like, okay, yeah, no, I'm okay with this new system that Vegapunk developed with the Seraphim and everything. I don't think we need the warlords anymore, so that's okay to be disbanded. Oh, they want to move Fishman Island? Sure, fine. If anything, it gives us an easier target to hit with our giant sky laser if it becomes necessary, as opposed to them being under the ocean. Because if Im wanted to use the giant sky laser on Fishman Island, they would then have to fire through the red line and into that area, and I don't think that would be a very easy thing to do, because you would have to fire directly through your own city, and as sadistic as Imu-Sama probably is, I think that would not go well. I don't think that would go particularly well in angering the other celestial dragons. So we get that. Yeah. So Im has allowed those things to happen. There's probably been other things. Im probably was the one that fully allowed for, Otohime to be able to start her petition to raise Fishman Island, all those years ago and everything. Yes, Milzigard was the one that kind of brought it forward and everything like that. And, that Milzigard was the one that brought Otohime there and allowed her to speak with, the council at the time or whatever. But Im would have had to okay that if the Gorosei are going to allow it to happen. So Im had to agree to that. So there's that. Which could lead to the fact that Im may have heard some whispers about that, something happened with the Sea Kings down in Fishman Island. Something happened down there. They acted very strangely while Milzigard was down there. Via Milzigard either mentioning it or someone else mentioning it. Im could have spies down in the Fishman Island. I wouldn't be surprised about that, given that there's CP9 and all the other CP agencies and everything. Them having someone down there that would have this information and be able to get it back to Imu-Sama would not surprise me in the slightest. Imu-Sama having, all of those connections and tendrils would not surprise me in the slightest. But, Im would then have this idea that, there may be, the Poseidon weapon may have awakened soon, and I'm going to need to be able to keep an eye on it if I need to destroy it. And while I may not be able to forcefully make them move Fishman Island up here, I can give them the opportunity to be able to do it themselves and make it look like they had their own decision in that. Like they were the ones that chose to do it themselves, as opposed to just me allowing them to do so. And then if they bring Fishman Island, however that forms, up to the surface, then their princess, Poseidon will come with them. And then that will give me a better ability to be able to get to her. And then as a side thing, if the Ryugu Kingdom is recognized as official members of the world government and they come to Reverie, there is the possibility that either she will come as well, the princess may come, or if that's not the case, I can force them into bringing her by, capturing the king and her brothers, and forcing them to come that way. So Im having different schemes like that wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. Being able to make it look like people have like the choice in the matters for this stuff, that they were allowed to do, that they are managed to like get past this insurmountable obstacle, when actually it's Imu just giving them this appearance that they were able to do that this glimmer of hope, and allowing them to do that, which then definitely falls into the sadistic side of Im. And from there, further down into the Reverie arc, when we finally get caught up on the Reverie arc, we find out that Cobra went and had a meeting with the Gorosei. And while there, Imu-Sama showed up. And Cobra was mentioning Nefeltari Lily and everything like that. And, it's stuff about the swords and everything that I already talked about with the Empty Throne and her weapon and how she left and everything. And go into much more detail in the Lily video that I did. But Im shows up, ascends to the throne, sits, and says something. Which, the girls here are like, Im, Cobra's still here. He's like, yes, I'm aware of that. Sit. Lily. just like ominous, menacing voice. Please, dear God, I hope there ends up being someone that when we do get this scene animated, please someone do an edit that is Imu having an exceedingly high-pitched voice, because that just sounds funny. Give him a chipmunk voice. That would be funny. Just for a funny bit there. But give him a Pika voice. Just for a small fun thing to do. But, we don't know what kind of voice Imu will have. We'll find that out at whatever point in time when this scene gets edited, or if we get something that, get it where we actually see what Imu-Sama looks like before that actually happens in the anime. We got a little bit before that happens. We got to finish up Wano first and get some other bits taken care of there, and then we'll, get introduced to Imu-Sama. So we'll see what happens there. We could get introduced to Imu-Sama before then in the actual manga, and actually get to see what they physically look like. I would be really okay if Imu-Sama was male or female. I think female would be a little bit more interesting, just because we haven't had a huge number of female villains in One Piece. We've had some, Big Mom being the main one, and then some of them have had, lower female underlings that they've had to deal with. But Big Mom is like the main female villain we've had in One Piece, because there weren't really any others. So if we have it be that Imu-Sama, what'd you hear, baby girl? Love you, pretty girl. That if it is that Imu-Sama is female, then that would just be like another layer on top of that. And once we do get a lot more information about Imu-Sama, I probably will go back and do another video about them, with new updated information once we get that. Do another one of these when I get to that point in time, once we get that information. But, Im, at that point in time, while they're talking with Cobra and everything and talking about Lily, this is when Sabo shows up and attacks the Gorosei and Imu-Sama. They all go into their silhouetted forms, their transformations, their devil fruit forms, their whatever it may be. Could be all Zoans, could be, different types of paramecia, could be Logias, where they just, shift the Logia power around, or the paramecia power around to give them these more demonic looking or interesting looking silhouettes, which is quite possibly and quite easily done. We've seen different ones do that before, with Magellan making a giant, poison hydra and everything like that, and Ace making different shapes, and Sabo making different shapes with their fire, and things like that. So people being able to do that is not surprising. Making all these different shapes to throw off your enemies, to make them think you're a Logia when actually you're a Paramecia, or a Paramecia when you're actually a Logia, to throw them off, and different things like that. Or that you are a Zoan, but, shifts around in those regards. And Sabo attacks, and Im just kind of swallows up the fire. It doesn't really look like anything else happens there to Im, but Sabo then tries to get, Cobra out of there, and that doesn't go well. Sabo gets stabbed in the back by a tail that seems to look like a devil's tail. Some people said it looked like it maybe had like poison on it or water on it. Again, it's all in silhouette for the most part, and we can't really tell at this point in time. In the anime, when it gets to it, it might be slightly clearer if we haven't gotten any other information up to that point in time, or it may still very much be in silhouetted form and we don't really get the chance to tell what happens, what was on the tail, and everything like that. It could have just been Sabo's blood dripping off the tail. I don't know. But we get that Sabo manages to escape thanks to Cobra sacrificing himself. And we, of course, find out that Wapol was actually watching through the hole in the wall and saw what happened. So Wapol knows about the Gorosei. Well, everybody knows about the Gorosei, but Wapol knows about the knows about Imu-Sama. And so there's that. And what ends up happening is, Im probably, sends whoever to go after the different, to go and to find Sabo and Wapol and try to eliminate them as quickly as possible. We know that Wapol and Vivi manage to escape and end up with Morgans, and we know that Sabo manages to escape and ends up on his way to the Lucia Kingdom on the ship, which ends up resulting in a huge amount of coincidence. Because what ends up happening is after that, they are like, Imu-Sama's like, I wish to test out the mother flame. And they're like, okay, sir, what island would you like us to test it on? I'm sure we can find the deserted Lelucia. You're aware that there's people that live on Lelucia? Yes. Why would you like to hit Lelucia? It's proximity. I want to witness the destruction from my window. Probably a very similar conversation happened, and they send off the giant sky laser, the mother flame. Could be a new version of Veranos. We're not sure. We'll find out later on down the line. They send this giant sky laser thing over Lelucia, and they laser bomb it, and it is, as far as we can tell, along with a good chunk of the ocean, just wiped out. A giant flipping hole in the ocean. Still there. And yeah, I know there's so many people putting out, it could have been the same thing that made, what set up NS Lobby, whenever NS Lobby was designed, which is a possibility. There could be other holes like this. We don't know if Imu-Sama was at one point a little bit a giant sky laser happy, and then he burned out the power that was inside of the sky laser, and it takes too long to recharge, and by the time it's recharged, they then use it, and it takes so long to recharge again, so they have to really be careful with it. And then because of York and the power plant, power station, they're now able to power the mother flame. But what ends up happening is, of course, the Lucia gets blown up, and kind of the analogy here that I had for this was, who here... Okay, so... who out of my audience is a musical theater fan or is a musical fan? Who likes Irving Berlin? Who loves the song White Christmas? Okay. Movie that is called White Christmas. It is filled with Irving Berlin Irving Berlin music. I could talk. That stars Bing Crosby and Danny Kaye and Vera Ellen and Rosemary Clooney, all of whom I love and are amazing actors and singers and dancers. And Rosemary Clooney couldn't dance, but she could sing worth anything in the world. There's various lines in it where it's Bing Crosby and Danny Kaye's character are like, well, give me a reason, blah, 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 blah. Well, it's not good, but it's a reason. And that's the vibe that I get from when Imu-Sama is like, oh, blow up Lelucia. Why, sir? It's proximity. Well, it's not good, but it's a reason. So, okay, is the vibe that I get there. And unbeknownst to them, until it's just before it's happening, they get a wiretap that says, "Oh, Sabo seems to be on this island. Sabo of the Revolutionaries is on this island. If we take out that, we can take out Sabo, and that takes care of one of our problems." Unbeknownst to them, Sabo is directing the call through the island, and it gets, interrupted, and they destroy the island. Sabo and the others manage to escape, and they manage to make their way back to, Kamabaka Kingdom, where, Sabo then explains to Dragon and Ivankov what he saw. I saw this figure. They were sitting on the empty throne. They transformed. They attacked me. I got stabbed. I've been treated. I still need to heal. And then Ivankov goes into YouTuber conspiracy mode about that, which I'll get to in a minute. But, we know that Im was the one that, had Blue Lucia blown up, is probably the one that made the decision to finally cut ties with Vegapunk, given how much, Vegapunk has brought to the table for them over the last 22 years or so that he's been working for the world government. Even with, now with York and everything like that, they probably get, Imu-Sama's permission to allow York to become, to continue to make that deal with York and allow them to try to make York a celestial dragon. So that's probably very much involved there. Not really too much else there about that part of the history there that we know. As I said, there's been various different translations for stuff like that, because Imu could be Umi backwards, which would be sea, which leads into people thinking that, Imu has the ocean no mi, or the water devil fruit, or some variation of that, and such, which is a possibility. Imu could just be a bird, if we're going with that logic of things with the animal there. We're just literal there, giving Oda's, proclivity for puns. I'm almost done, pretty girl. You're very close to the edge of that bed. Okay, that made me better. That made me feel better. She was like right next to the edge of the bed, and I did not want her to fall. That would be bad. And there's, of course, how they use the different pronouns and everything like that. And they use a lot of these and thous for like archaic English pronouns and stuff like that in the Viz translation for how they did that. So for how that like would shift around in like Japanese and stuff like that for kanji and katakana and stuff like that. So these and thous and very Shakespearean type, talking ways of speaking and everything. In regards to trivia and kind of going off of the Nerona family name, which I'll get to, there is so the existence of Im seems to be somewhat hinted at by Akainu way back in chapter 793 when he asks the Gorosei, it's like, what, is there someone above you in authority? And that seems to be something that was hinted at there. At some point in time, while the conversation with Imu and Cobra and the Gorosei is happening, the name Nerona comes up, the Nerona family, because I think that it's written in Lily's letter that is given and passed down through the Alabasta royal family, and that's stated to be one of the 20 families that founded the world government was the Nerona family. We don't know what island they were from or what kingdom or anything like that, but there was the Nerona family, which was headed by Saint Nerona Imu, which seems to be possibly who Imu-Sama is, or at the very least, they took their name for continuity purposes, depending on stuff. For all we know, Imu may not actually be a member of one of the 20 royal families that founded the world government. They could be someone who's from a totally separate group and just showed up and just like took control and rallied everyone behind them. Could very much be who they are. That's a possibility there. And Ivankov, who is looking through this book that seems to have Genesis written on the cover of it, is like, well, if this is the same Imu-Narona from 800 years ago, we know that there is the perennial youth operation, or the eternal youth or immortality operation that can be done with the Apiopnomy and with Law's fruit. And if that's the case, then this could be the same person, but we don't know the exact rules for that devil fruit, for that operation, because we've never seen it been performed yet. But it's, the Chekhov's gun of like, well, it's been said, so something has to be done with it. Something has to be used for it. They have to find out that this was used at some point in time. Otherwise, these rumors would not have persisted that it is part of this devil fruit for the past, however long the devil fruit's been around. And as I said before, I don't think the Gorosei themselves are immortal, because eventually, like, the high-ranking Marines, Marine fleet admirals, and the admirals themselves would eventually notice that, okay, A, these guys don't age, B, these are the same Gorosei that were around when my predecessor was here, or my predecessor's predecessor was here. And they don't seem to have gotten any older or anything like that. So I don't think the Gorosei are immortal. Im is most likely immortal if it is the same one. Zombie, ghost, weird projection from the past. Actually immortal, god, goddess, whatever, something affected by a devil fruit that made them immortal. If the devil fruit already didn't make them immortal, if it was the perennial youth operation that made them immortal. I plan to have another video that will be a companion piece to this video where I discuss the pros and cons of immortality and how that could be applied to Imu-Sama. So I will have a separate video about that. Either that will come out the same week as this one or the week after, depending on how that works with like chapters coming out. But what we also see is that I believe that it's Marcus Mars that refers to Imu-Sama as the creator, very similar to how they refer to the first 20 families. And then going into some of the breakdowns for the names, Im in Norse mythology is the name of the Jotun, or the giant frost giants that are there, the Jotun. That is the name of one of them. And then also for how the name is written in katakana, there is one of the kanji, or one of the symbols means Buddha for how Imu-Sama is written. And then Narona, for the fact that they are referencing the Narona family as one of the 20 founders. Narona, just via basically looking things up, Narona in both Christian and Hindu is a girl's name that can mean beautiful. So that can probably add fire to the concept of, oh, Imu-Sama might be female. And then Narona is also to a degree also connected to the name Nero, which would connect it back to Emperor Nero of Rome, who was considered to be one of the worst emperors within Rome ever. And Narona also is a very popular last name in I believe it's within the Philippines, within the Philippine Islands. That it has connections there as a last name from what I found. And a lot of these have probably been mentioned by other people as well, but I just wanted to mention them here. And some people who have much better connotations for how kanji and katakana work can break that down far better than I can. But these are just my thoughts of it so far. So I do think that Imu-Sama is probably immortal, has been around at least since 800 years ago. Possibly could either have the perennial youth operation, I would buy that. Could have been made immortal through some other means, or given some things that I'm going to go over in some of the immortality concepts in the other video I'm going to do for Imu-Sama and immortality. We'll have a separate concept there that I'll be discussing in the pros and cons of that. So that's what I have here for Imu-Sama, King-Sama, whatever, and the empty throne. This is what I have here. I also am not going to be surprised if at some point in time they just, reveal it and it's Imu-Sama sitting on the empty throne, and that's just how we get the reveal of what exactly Imu-Sama looks like. That's not going to surprise me. And then it'll be like, okay, so whoever was right about it being male, female, we get this, we get that. any other comparisons there for who was right about that stuff, we'll find out then. But that's what I have. I thank you for watching. As I said, there will be a companion piece of this. It'll be about Imu-Sama and immortality, and that will either be up the same week this goes up or the week after. And then after that, I am moving on from the world of government videos in regards to royals and rulers. And I believe the next one that I will be doing will be the first of 2 Amazon Lily Empress videos, where I'll be discussing Shaki and Gloriosa, and then the video after that will be where I talk about Boa Hancock. So, because I believe that is the next kingdom setup of government, some kind that we find. So that's what I have. I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. It is the beginning of July, and it is still very hot here in Nebraska, and I am in a black dress, and I have to go change because it's getting very warm. So thank you. Bye.